right, welcome to Lift Big, Eat Big Live, episode number 3, our third week here. Obviously, we have myself, James DeLacy, we have Cole Wolf, and we have Mona DeLacy, or we can say Mona Pretorius if you want to look up her athletic accomplishments. Obviously, we've got some good athletes and coaches in this room, CrossFit Games athletes, Commonwealth medalists in weightlifting, 2 times world strongest man competitor, all sorts of stuff going on. But today we will be discussing a few different topics. We're going to start with some more fitness related stuff, talking about periodization. So essentially the organization of training. And then we're going to go into, for the weekend, the preview of the European Weightlifting Championships coming up starting tomorrow. I know Mona's very excited about that. And also the World's Strongest Man is around the corner as well. So Colin, being an ex-competitor at the World's Strongest Man, will have some insight for us going into that. But let's start with our periodization topic. So let me just define it quickly for anyone listening. So periodization essentially is just the organization or the planning of training. Essentially anything where you have a plan and what you're doing, regardless of whatever your goal is considered periodization. It doesn't have to be a fancy structure. And I know, Colm, I know you have an interest in this too as well, within, I guess, some of the different things you've listened to and read. Do you want to maybe dive into a little bit of your thoughts around periodization and maybe how you used it or how you use it within strongman training?
Yeah, so periodization is definitely something I'm pretty into. And for myself, sorry, can you guys hear that dog?
Yep. Yeah, but it's all good. Yeah. Oh, do you want me to? I'll carry on while you go. Sort of. Yeah. So with periodization, you have a lot of different forms of periodization. So I think most people will be familiar with what's called block periodization, which is essentially prioritizing or training one quality for a training cycle and then moving in a phasic manner through. So for example, you might start with a hypertrophy or muscle building phase, and then you'll go into a strength phase, and then you might go into a power phase. And each of those phases may be 6, 8, 12 weeks long or longer. And that seems to be the stock standard way that people get into periodization into that block periodization. But block periodization has many, many problems within, I guess, most sports. I would not recommend doing block periodization. Then outside of that, you've got just your basic linear periodization, undulating periodization, which is just essentially progressive overload, really, if you think about it that way. And then you've obviously got conjugate, which is, I guess, most popular by Westside, who has their own version of it. Essentially, conjugate is just training all qualities at once, kind of like a vertical integration approach within, I guess, a training cycle, training week, or training day. But Colin, do you want to maybe carry on with a little bit of your periodization there, and we'll come back to that?
Yeah, so ultimately, I think with periodization, like James was saying, the block periodization's got a few limitations. And I think what I see a lot of people fall into is just following it a little bit too much by the book. So with a lot of the periodization models, it's almost like they're made in the assumption the person you're training is just a robot. Like there's no, like say block periodization, you do, like let's say you go strength or you go hypertrophy, strength, power block. Everything goes super smoothly and you just follow it all to the T. I think in reality, a lot of coaches nowadays, myself included, you kind of use a little bit of all of them in the sense that let's say I'm training for someone for strongman who needs to put on muscle mass. We might do I would still call it a hypertrophy block just for simplicity's sake, but it's not a traditional, if you look at some of the older textbooks, they'll have a very specific, it'll probably be something like 8 to 12 reps. You'll do it for 4 to 6 weeks, and it's just a certain style of exercise. You probably, depending on the sport, like a lot of the times they don't really take into account the sport. So if you follow that specifically in the context of strongman, and basically just do bodybuilding training, right? When you go back to doing your strongman training, because you haven't done any strongman stuff for 4 to 6 weeks, there's a detraining effect on those things that you haven't trained. So I think the reality nowadays is you need to just make sure you're prioritizing what is important for the sport. So for example, in strongman, even though it's technically a hypertrophy block, we're not I would still have people do carries. I would still have people do overhead lifts, but they are going to be light enough that it's not going to take away from the hypertrophy training. And if you add it up in terms of volume, the majority of the volume would still be towards hypertrophy training, but we're doing enough to maintain those other qualities. That's ultimately how I like to view things. But if it gets very mixed up, there's so many factors. So like if again with strongman, using that as an example, because there is so many different things that you want to take into account. You could even you could, depending on what kind of lens you're looking at it through, you could label it more of a conjugate periodization model because you're training multiple qualities at once. So I think, I'm curious what your guys' thoughts are, but I feel like overall, everything kind of, you need to be aware of everything and you're kind of taking it all into account and remaining flexible at all times. So something that I quite liked that, sorry, I forget the guy's name. You just had him on the periodization guy.
John Kiley.
That's the one. So you can check out Sweet Science of Fighting podcast if you guys haven't seen it. But I like the fact, he just mentioned, if a coach has spent a large amount of time planning out, let's say a year-long block to quite a high amount of detail, you're just naturally not going to want to divert from that. If certain coaches do this, I definitely did this earlier on in my career. You might sit down for a few hours, plan everything out stringently. Something doesn't quite go right, but you don't really want to divert from it because you've spent all this time planning things out. So I think that's a big trap that even if you're training yourself, I've also fallen into that, not just with training others, but for following a plan myself, is I think you need to always be aware that you need to be flexible. Life is so diverse and changing all the time, mental stress, stuff with work, you guys now as parents, that's going to affect sleep and everything. So you need to be able to change on the fly. And I even think that even with, I think tracking data is fantastic. I like to do it. But, if you look at things like heart rate variability and everything, I still think that's all, if you look at the whole, training plan as a whole, just be aware everything's good data, but you still need to be, as a coach, you still need to actually coach on the day, if that makes sense. So you shouldn't just stick to the actual plan if what you're seeing in front of you is telling you something different. Hopefully that makes sense. Yeah.
Before I go down the rabbit hole, I know Mona, you've around the flexibility side, you've had to be very flexible. You're currently coaching a junior national champion in weightlifting. Junior, right? I hope I haven't got that wrong. You can correct me.
Yeah, and
so you're currently
a state
coaching
champion.
A junior national. So a champion little weightlifter. But he's got a lot else going on, so you've had to be flexible too. Do you want to maybe dive into what you've had to do there to keep him in peak shape?
Yes, definitely. And also, I just wanted to also say I 100% agree what Colm was saying about the flexibility of things, because there's so many things that play a role. And you were spot on when you said, life happens, stress happens, people might have, relationship problems or things like that, and they'll come into the gym and they just won't be performing. And those are things that as a coach, you need to look at if, you want your athlete to perform at the end of the day. Otherwise, like you said, they're not robots, and ultimately they will get injured. Now, when it comes to periodization, my way of how I used to be able to do it is also, again, different to, there's no cookie cutter way of doing periodization, even for weightlifting. And for example, when it came to competition cycles, it took many, many trial and errors. And basically, even when I was working with my coach, we came to terms with, I'm one of those athletes who, for example, can go heavy up until very close to competition. And that was when I would peak. If I went into a deload phase too quickly or too far away from the competition, ultimately when it came competition day, I would feel flat. I would just not feel myself. So I was just one of those athletes who could go pretty heavy up until close to competition. But like James mentioned, now I'm training one of the athletes who will now be competing at nationals in mid-June, beginning of July. And how I've worked his training has also changed over the years, because he's come from many different sports as well. So even though he's been doing weightlifting for quite some time now with me, we've had to adjust quite a bit, because, you know, sometimes he will do track and field, he would play basketball, and basketball was actually one of his main sports that he was doing as well. So when we started off with weightlifting, weightlifting used to basically be almost, even though he still wanted to do really well in weightlifting, he ultimately did it to better his basketball. But now he is basically all in just weightlifting, and every now and again he'll play some basketball and things like that. And again, those are things that we need to look at when planning his training program. And also what I wanted to add was, that's why it's so important also when you work with a coach to tell your coach exactly, you don't have to go into all detail, but to have that good communication with your coach when it comes to things that's maybe going on in your life, maybe sports that you're doing, if you are maybe battling with niggles or injuries, because those are also things at the end of the day that will affect the training program and ultimately leading up to if you want to peak for a competition or something like that. And I'm a big believer in, if an athlete is sick or they've got a niggle and you do take a little step back, it doesn't mean that they're not going to reach their goals at the end of the day. Like what you're saying now, Colm, even with linear progression and stuff like that, taking a little step back, sometimes listening to the body and actually just honing in on that can actually end up making them perform even better at the end of the day, because sometimes those are just the little signs that the athletes are giving, or their bodies are giving, that you as the coach must look at to help them succeed at the end of the day. Now, when it comes to, for example, Eli's programming with regards now, especially up to nationals. Now, up until nationals now, I mean, there's many different cycles that you can look at. Like I know you guys mentioned like the hypertrophy and the strength and the power. But even for weightlifting, like you can do different training cycles. So depending on how far they are from a competition, if they are very far from competitions, I always like starting off with just like some volume training, doing a block of volume training. And then depending on the athlete's strength or weaknesses, we'll go into strength cycles, and that can even change. Like some athletes, you might do a squat cycle, or with other athletes, you might do a pull cycle, or you'll end up doing tempos or things like that, just depending on what the athlete needs in order to become better at what weaknesses they have. And then obviously also then the accessories are things that are very important. So if they're very far from competition, we'll add in a lot of accessories, working on things that, you know, if the athlete is, you know, maybe they need to do more core strengthening work or pulling stuff, or like single arm work, or like single leg work, like Bulgarian split squats and those kind of things. So when it comes to close to competition, those are often the first things that we end up cutting out of the program, and maybe we will just do a very light percentage of it, just to make sure that when it comes to the classical lift, those are the things that we ultimately want them to lift the best at. So when it also with my competition cycles, especially now with Eli, we will often do between an 8 or a 12 block competition cycle, just depending on how frequently he's competing. If a competition is really far away and we've done many training cycles, we will maybe do a longer approach and do a 12-week competition cycle. If he competed, you know, not too long ago, then we'll just, you know, do some like basically deload training, getting his body healthy again, and then going up to say a 8-week competition cycle. And normally what we will do with our competition cycles as well is, those are normally the times when you start to focus, like I said earlier, a bit more on the classical lifts. So for those that doesn't know, like your snatch and your clean and jerk, so your competition lifts basically. So if you were doing a lot of hang power snatches or block work or split jerk from racks and those kind of things, now's the time to start putting these lifts together, because ultimately those are the things that you're going to be doing in competition. And then, like I said, you will start to cut accessories. And then also, for example, with Eli, if he's doing other sports like basketball or track and field, whatever he has to do for school, then I'll, say to him, okay, we need to cut back on sport a bit. Otherwise, we can't obviously train as heavy. So something's got to give at the end of the day, because in my mind, also the athlete, you have to look at the athlete as a whole. And I'm not there to break the athlete or have the athlete hate the sport by the time they reach senior level. We always look at the big picture. And, I always say, let's play the long game. And then also other things that I end up doing when it comes to like my training blocks is we would end up doing a lot heavier lifts. We'll cut back a lot on volume. We'll cut back a lot on sets leading up to competitions. And like I said, sometimes depending on the day that they will compete, we will have like a Friday heavy day or a Saturday heavy day, just to basically get them ready for comp mode. Often those won't even be maxes, but just so they can start to feel a bit heavier load. But again, I don't want to push my athlete to be broken, so we won't do it too often. And if they start to recover slower, then we'll start to cut back on those kind of things building up to the competition. And then ultimately also what we do is, like, for example, when it's competition week, we'll end up like the week before competition, we will do like their start lift. So whatever they are going to start in the snatch or in the clean and jerk. And then we'll just end up going lighter and lighter. A few days before competition, we'll just work on basically speed and technique. That's the time where you want to especially motivate the athlete. You want to make sure that, don't just look at the training side of things, but also the mindset stuff. So really make sure that the athlete is going into the competition confident. And again, that's why I always say there has to be that good communication between the athlete and the coach so that they go into competition. The coach knows what he expects of the athlete knows what's expected of him on competition day. And ultimately, that's how I've always worked with most of my athletes. And that's also how I've seen the best results.
Yeah, that was a long, in-depth answer, but that was good. And that's hopefully valuable for a lot of weightlifters and other strength sport athletes out there. But I think Mona nailed it when she mentioned as well about being flexible and attacking weaknesses. Periodization was originally created within the Soviet Union, and it was, I know you listened to it, Colin, but essentially what John was saying was around the separation between mind and body. It was all about the body trying to predict adaptation to certain training and then creating cycles based on that. But there's no way in how you can predict how you respond and adapt to certain types of training. So you're basically assuming that your 8-week whatever cycle is going to carry over to the following cycle. And then you've got on top of that, most periodization structures were built around, I guess you could say, like throwing sports as well, some weightlifting and things like that. But within throwing sports, you have a constant guide with whether training is working or not, because you're throwing all the time. That's your measurement. That's your measuring stick that you have each training session. So, for example, if you're throwing the shot put or hammer and your distances are starting to decrease through training, then hey, something's not going right, and you can change things. Obviously, that's under the Bondarchuk methods. If anyone's familiar with Bondarchuk, he is one of the leading Soviet, I guess, periodization gurus, you could say, hammer throws coach. He wrote Transfer of Training. He's, I guess, most famous for his pyramid of exercise classification. A colleague and friend of ours, Martin Bingus, trained directly under him. And he's got some very good insights around that as well. So, yeah, there's lots of different things going there. But where periodization is now, it's more plugging those weaknesses. So if you can, there's a couple of things you can do. You can either go by feel. You probably know if you're fast, slow, need more conditioning, whatever that is. And that's what you maybe prioritize during that period. And as you get through that cycle, then you might move on to the next thing. The other one is to use certain tests. Maybe you can do some kind of benchmark conditioning test or benchmark strength testing, and that can give you an idea as well. But I think what's really interesting is the idea, again, from Martin Bingus around Bondarchuk stuff there is it's variety that really gives you that quick boost. It's that novel stimulus. I know Vladimir Ishirin, the block periodization fella, he a novel training stimulus is one of his 3 training what is it called? Training volume or training load parameters. So your volume, intensity, and novelty. And I think, as we all know, when you do something new, you make mad gains really quickly. And that's one of those things where if you're changing but not changing too often, just that change, doesn't even matter what order you're doing it in, is going to make improvements. So that's something to keep in mind as well regarding periodization. I don't know if there's anything you guys wanted to add further, Colm, if there was anything there. Before getting back to the podcast, I want to let you know that down in the description is a link to the Lift Big, Eat Big Underground. And within that, you get access to all our training programs, online courses, and into our private Discord community, where all 3 of us are in there to help you with whatever it is with your training. Regarding the programs, we have Mona, who's done all of the weightlifting cycles. We have Colm, who's done the strongman off-season and strongman competition programs. Then we have all the hallmark Lift Big, Eat Big training programs, Pump Dragon, Flanks Method, and many more. And I've also added muscle building specialization programs within that, and are continuing to update and add training programs into our app. You also get access to Mona's Weightlifting Mastery online course, and you get to join these calls live in the audience where you can ask members only question and answers at the end of each episode. So if that sounds like you, go down in the description. There's a link there to the Lift Big, Eat Big Underground, and that'll give you access to everything I just mentioned.
Periodization, absolutely great to have a plan, but just be fluid with it. And remember that, like, if you're trying to look for the best kind of periodization, if that thing existed, like, everyone would do the exact same thing. But like James has just mentioned, there's so many different kinds, and everyone progresses with different kinds. So just be fluid. Even if you've got your plan, but like Mona said, your knee starts hurting, it's totally fine to back off. You don't have to stick rigidly to that plan. We're not robots.
Yeah. And the hardest thing as well, like, you don't have, like, progress isn't just adding more weight to the bar each week or always doing more each week. It can be doing the same. You can do the same thing 2-3 weeks in a row and then go add more weight, more reps or whatever. And that's something, I mean, I struggle with that all the time. I always want to do more weight, more reps or more sets each week, but you can't do that as much as I want to. I wish I could.
Especially now when you're over the age of 30.
Age is just a number. You know that.
Yeah. But
so what we'll do is
everything. Oh yeah. No, I was going to say definitely everything does start hurting at some point if you've done sport for a really long time. And even things to look at, like, for example, if you are a youth level athlete compared to, a senior level athlete compared to a master's level athlete, those kind of things will also all look different at the end of the day in order to get the athlete.
Well, you should dictate how much volume you can handle. When you're young, you can go nuts. I remember I used to, like, max out every session when I was younger. At AUT, bro, I would go in there, I'd max squat, and then I basically max deadlift, and that was like, and I'd just add 1.25 kilos every week. Bro, it worked. It worked. Initially, obviously.
I was going to say, did you end up breaking some world records there with that 1.25 that you added?
I ended up, I think I got to like a 145 kg squat and like a 180 deadlift at 74 kilos or something like that, which isn't half bad for someone who's just maxing out the damn. But I mean, it's not all I did. I did other things. I go do my progress as well and all the other stuff too. But yeah, that's what I used to do there. I'd go there and I'd just max out. That was the heavy lifting.
Can I ask, James, when you've been working as an S&C coach, have you ever had it where you've got like a plan and then the head coach just wants you to do something else? For example, just smash the boys. Yep. All the time. Yep, you've had that all the time.
All the time, man. It depends. You can get some good head coaches that like you actually plan things with, and then things that you go to plan. But like, outside of that, I mean, it's more so what the head coach does that ruins your plan more than what they want. So they're like, you'll have a session planned. Maybe it's like, okay, today's going to be a lighter day of training on the field, and then the head coach just like goes nuts. And then when the guys come to the gym, then you're going to I'll remove things from the program based on the training that day or yesterday. Another easy telltale sign is when you turn up to training and everyone's really quiet. So we've had that a few times, and then we basically change training on the spot. Like on the spot.
So that's basically another variable that's kept you being flexible.
Yeah.
Just
and it needs to be on the spot. Like I'll have like a whole session planned, and then on the spot, just like change. And but like as you do it long enough, you have things up your sleeve, you know, that you can do during different times. So like if that's happening, then we'll be like, okay, we're just going to play games, and we'll just play like small sided games and stuff like that, and get the energy back. And then within the gym, it'll just be, okay, I'm removing these things from the program. We're just doing this. We're doing less of this, and things like that. But I don't think the whole the idea of periodization within that, I don't think is that important. Like, well, at least within team sports, because it's not a strength sport. So as long as you're getting in the gym and being consistent and you're not injured, you're going to be fine. You could literally, honestly, I believe you could do the same thing every week and just be like same weights, everything. I've seen it. I've seen it in the NRL. Guys like, you remember Michael Luck back in the day? The tackling machine.
I know the name.
And the Warriors.
I don't.
He would make like 60 tackles a game. Like insane. And then he'll just come and he'll just like half squat 60 kilos in the gym each week. But like, I don't even know if he could do much more. Like it's, that just doesn't translate. It doesn't really matter. And it's just one of those things where guys are stupidly strong within their sport. The gym is just there just to bring some kind of adaptation, but not to so much like improve performance. You don't have to push them like crazy within that. But we actually had a question here from, I think your client called him No Handstand. He's saying that's basically step loading, right? But I'm not sure what you are referring to, No Handstand. So maybe you can clarify within the comments there on YouTube what you're referring to. But if there's nothing else, maybe we can move on to some previews. Mona, I think you've got little Mia there. I don't know if she's being a little worm and anything there. Otherwise, we can start with the strongman stuff, depending. How's Mia there?
Okay, I think we can do it. Like, we've got like a few seconds.
Okay, let's dive into the European Championships. Starting tomorrow. Well, when everyone listens to this, starting today.
Yes, that's true.
Dive in, Leaf?
And it will be from, it's going from the 15th. So it's going from Saturday up until I think next Sunday.
Until the following Sunday.
Yeah, so I think it's running for 8 days. So it's going to be 8 days of jam-packed, seeing some of the strongest athletes in the world.
You say jam-packed, but maybe we can allegedly talk about potential corruption. We're only having one session in a day for a lot of days just to keep people in the hotel for longer for more cash. Or at least that's my theory. Hopefully I don't get sued or something, but that's my theory. It's alleged. I didn't say
I won't add to that. But that is
that's my theory.
There's a lot of days. It's got like, I think there's 1 day or 2 days that might have one competition day, and then the rest has 2, which is quite weird because, weightlifting doesn't run all day. Normally it's like maximum 3 hours, if that, like per category. So you could have definitely fit in like a bit more categories in a day. But I'm not quite sure.
Maybe the officials wanted some sightseeing time.
I'm not sure the reasoning behind why it's 8 days long. But also one thing I did want to add is like, if there's any weightlifters listening or, people who are interested in the sport of weightlifting. So if you ask, where can they find the live stream? I think the only stream is on Weightlifting House, and unfortunately you have to pay for it. That's the only downfall that's been happening like the last couple of years. They've been not live streaming this stuff and making it free anymore. So you have to actually pay to watch all of the events, which is quite sad because, you do want weightlifting to grow at the end of the day. I understand from Weightlifting House's side of things, but I know there's a lot of people who want to watch their family members lift and stuff, but they have to pay to watch them lift. And I think, like I said, the only stream comes from Weightlifting House. And there's going to be some amazing athletes. also the categories to like look out for are the ones that will also be in Paris 2024. So they again have changed the weight categories. So for example, where the 64 class would have been one of my favorites to watch, it is now the 71 kg class. So the girls who were in the 64 had to either, if you want to qualify for Olympics, had to either move down to the 59s, or move up to the 71s, which is quite a massive jump either way.
That's big.
That is big because last year when I competed at the New Zealand International Competition for one of the qualifying events, my weight was 59 at the time. But when I was at my best and I was competing internationally, my weight was always around, so I would compete under 63, which was then, and then it changed to 64. But my normal body weight would often be around 65, 66 around there, and then I'll cut back to my competition weight. But for an athlete now who normally competes at a 64, you are lean at that weight. Having to gain weight is extremely hard. Like we were talking about, the bulking last week. So gaining weight is really hard, but then also cutting. So if you have to cut like 6 kgs, often the first thing that tends to go is the leg strength, what you see in weightlifters. So that's going to be really interesting. So I'm super interested to see what's going to happen at this competition. So look out for like the 59 kilogram class and the 71s for the females, which are one of my favorites. And also I know, like, for example, Romania is competing. So like Toma Loredana, who's the current Olympic record holder world record holder. And she competes in the 71 class, and her snatch is 119 kilograms as a 71 kg female athlete snatch. So her clean and jerk is like close to 140. And then for the men, I know Cole, we've spoken about him quite a bit, Lasha. So Lasha will be competing. And Lasha also has his competitor, I think he's from Armenia, if I'm not mistaken. So he's going to be going head-to-head against Lasha. So that's going to be super interesting to see. Lasha, I think they might be on the very last day. So they will probably be next Sunday. Watch out for those categories. I think in the men's 81s, the Bulgarian athlete that I was talking about, the young athlete who, I can't remember if he either broke a world record or he won world champs.
Was he like 17 or something?
Yeah, he's super young. I think he's like 17 or 18, but he's going to be competing as well. I think they said at the World he ended up bombing. So I'm looking out to see, we're going to see some very close head-to-head competitions, and it's going to be super interesting.
Any of your other British and Belgium and all those friends competing in this event?
So even Emily Campbell, she's in the super heavies for the women. So she's one to look out for. Sarah Davies, I'm not sure if I think she's going to lift in the 71s as well. Then Maud is the Canadian who's the Olympic champion. She's gone down to the 59 kilogram class. And then like,
but she's competing in Europeans?
Who? Maud.
Yeah.
Yes. No, are they? No, they did Pan American. Yeah. I'm sorry. Okay. Thank you for reminding me there. Okay. Canada is not part of Europe.
Skip that one.
Skip that one. Okay. So, that was a blonde moment. But, someone like Zoe Smith will be competing. And I know Zoe had, some troubles at her last competition. She was just battling some, mental health. So I'm very interested to see what she's going to be lifting. I think she's either going to be in the 59s or in the 64s, which will be very interesting. And then men, I know in the Inside the Games, I read, for example, Bodie Champ will be lifting. I'm not sure which category he's going to be lifting in. So looking out to see a big total from him. I know at the last competition that he competed in, or is he lifting? No, I might be mistaken, but I'm pretty sure I saw on the Inside the Games, they spoke about Bodie Champ, and they spoke about him just weighing in at the last competition and not actually lifting. So, yeah,
But why would any athletes lift in, say, the 64s or non-Olympic weight classes? Won't they all just gravitate to the Olympic weight classes?
Not if you just want a medal. So if you just want to go and get a medal or points for your team to, win best team at the end of the day, then they will go and lift in the non-Olympic weight classes. And then also, if you think about it, if as the country, if you don't want, you can't have, for example, 4 athletes from one country lifting. I think there's a limit of 2 per country. So you have to spread them out. And like I said, also, if you put them in a category that, this athlete will potentially not qualify for Olympics, but they will get a medal for their country, then you will obviously put them in that category.
And they changed Olympic qualification, right? So can you compete in non-Olympic weight classes and take those points like you could last time?
That's a very good question. I know there was some controversy, and I'm thinking that for the competitions that you need to qualify in, I think that you have to compete. And I think that was one of the things that a lot of athletes, that's why they actually ended up for these competitions that are Olympic qualifiers. They've already either dieted down to their weight class or they've gained the weight to compete at, the next weight class.
Yeah, because for anyone listening, Mona got done dirty by those previous Olympic qualification rules. She would have qualified for the Olympics, but you could literally compete in a weight class below or above or any weaker weight class or whatever it is, and then take your points from those weight class, directly transfer them to your weight class. Crazy.
Whichever weight class
or you could just or you just weigh in on that weight class. You don't even lift on that weight class, and you can take all your points to that weight class. How I don't even know how you even come up with that rule.
Yeah.
So what, you could never lift in the actual weight class that you are.
Yep. So last cycle, you could be say a 59, and you do all your competition at 59. Then you go to a competition, you just weigh in at 64, and you take all those points from 59 to 64.
Yeah, or the 55s. Yeah, and also the way they did it,
whichever way you do it.
Yeah. So before they had a thing called the Sinclair system. So you would get points via the Sinclair system. And then what they ended up doing for the last Olympic qualifiers, they had a new system called the Roby system. And that also only lasted now for the 4 years or 5 years.
One cycle, right?
Yeah, one cycle. Now they've changed it again, because one of the things that I also brought up in one of the meetings was, people saw loopholes and they went for it. And yes, all, good and well, they got their athletes in, they competed. There were athletes in there that wouldn't even come anywhere in their own continent, things like that. But they ended up qualifying because, because of seeing the loopholes. So, for example, like James was saying, you could be a 59 kilogram lifter and then just cut back to the 55, lift bare minimum. Maybe you could win that category, get your points, and obviously you'll get a lot more points than what you would have gotten in the 59s, and take those points over to your whichever weight class you want to compete in.
Yeah, but the worst part it wasn't even really it was loopholes, but it was the fact that even halfway through the first quarter when it started, not even the IWF officials knew the rules. Yes. No one knew what the rules were, and everyone was asking everyone, "Can you do this? Can you do that?" And no one knew, and they was already collecting points. Like, why wouldn't you sort this out before you released the Olympic qualification system? It's crazy.
Yeah. And that's why we are now in a position where there's 50% less athletes that can qualify for this Olympics than all the other previous Olympics. So 50% less for 2024. So it's going to be even harder for athletes to qualify. And then also 2028, that's still something to be discussed. They don't know yet if weightlifting will be in or not. So I guess weightlifting needs to, like I said, they need to clean up the act, and hopefully with, what they are doing now, weightlifting will end up staying in the Olympics, because you would want that for all future and young athletes.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Do you think, just a little bit different topic, with raw powerlifting really trying to push, like the IPF are really trying to push to get in the Olympics. Do you think that's realistic that they could ever get in, just from your guys' perspective, or nah?
Don't they have to all unify under one federation first?
They're trying to do it as the IPF. So the one,
okay,
it's the same. Like it'll be all the same rules that guy who just broke the world record that we spoke about a couple of weeks ago. So they've got standardized rules for that division, but they've brought in a lot of things in the hopes of getting recognized. So like you're not allowed to be seen sniffing ammonia. Like there's all these kind of little rules like that. Yeah, that they want, with the hope that the Olympic Committee will recognize them as like a sport worthy to be on the Olympic stage. But at the same time, like I've heard this talk since we were at uni, like the rumblings of it. I was just curious with what you guys know about the Olympic Committee and whatnot.
Well, Colm,
well,
if you think about it, okay, how things have changed. Like, for example, when I did karate way back in the day, they had talks, and this was like, oh my gosh, I was like 7 or 8 when I started karate, and I mean, I'm now like in my 30s. And back then, they spoke about karate going into the Olympics. And then, last Olympics, 2020 or 2021, it was in the Olympics. But it was only one time. So they made like a debut, and then they said it will only be featured once. And I mean, they've put things like surfing.
Really? So it's not coming back.
There was wall climbing. I know there was break dancing. So they've put really weird sports into the Olympics. So honestly, if they had to put powerlifting,
break dancing.
Yes, there is break
in the
dance.
Youth Olympics. They have break dancing.
Oh, wow.
So if you think about it, if they have those kind of sports, I have no doubt that, powerlifting is probably, one of the ones that they might even put in. But the only thing is, what I would think is, powerlifting is a very hard sport to watch, because it's so long. Because, even though they've got just the 3 lifts, but it can go like a whole day. And when it comes to the Olympics, one of the things the Olympic Committee wants is they want viewers. So they want TV viewership. So, for example, if it's going to be a whole day, how much TV viewership would they get? So I'm sure that is one of the main things that they'll look at. So they can do all of the things, to try clean it up and do all of those things. But at the end of the day, they need to bring spectators to the Olympics. And if they do that, then I can see powerlifting being in it. But if they don't bring spectators, because that was one of the things that always gets brought up. And that's why with weightlifting, they want to even increase the viewership of weightlifting, the spectators, making it more spectator friendly, all of these kind of things. And already weightlifting is such a fast sport. So I would be interested. It would be interesting to see if they do put it in. And I think it's just one of those things that we will probably have to wait. I mean, I think 2028 sports have already been released, or it might be released very soon. So I guess
I think they have been.
Yeah. So I guess we'll see soon. Otherwise, maybe for 2032 might be.
In theory, if your sport had the funding and could afford it, is it possible just to pay your way in?
For the Olympics?
I don't think so.
Yeah. Not as an athlete, but let's say...
Yeah, as a federation. Yeah. To be honest, Colm, that's one of those things where, maybe a person doesn't want to go into detail about things, but, there's often ways, if you had some sort of a partnership with these people and things like that, you don't know what goes on behind closed doors, and that's also a way.
It sounds like it sounds like you know what goes on behind closed doors.
No. No.
And then she mutes the mic straight away. That's guilty as charged.
I know, right? No, I'm just saying that, things happen.
Well,
it's a federation at the end of the day. Yes.
There's corruption. 100%. IOC is
that there's not, but yeah.
Yeah, the IOC is corrupt as hell, like all these big sporting organizations. There's no doubt, allegedly, so I don't get sued. But
I'll also put allegedly for all of my comments I made.
But yeah, I don't know. Powerlifting's a pretty niche sport. I don't know if powerlifting's more niche than weightlifting, but weightlifting's got the history with the different countries and stuff like that. So
yeah, and I do think weightlifting is a lot more visually
appealing.
like for a casual viewer who doesn't know anything, it's very like you put the weight over your head, you get the lift. Whereas like powerlifting, you see someone like squat, and then you'll see these lights, and it's like, oh, to me he looked deep, but he didn't get it, or vice versa.
True.
And like the bench call and stuff, there's those little. Whereas weightlifting, like I know you've got the press out and whatnot, but compared to the amount of times in powerlifting you see depth or dodgy lockout,
someone with a massive bench arch.
Yeah, that's
that's a new rule, right?
And I think the reasoning might have been for the viewership, for potentially the Olympics. But I don't know, to be honest.
Do you want to explain the rule for the listeners?
So it's, I think the new rule is that you have to, I don't even know the exact specific. I think it's to do with the depth, right? So of your elbow on the bench. So I think it has to go below. So from the side, if I stand like this, at the bottom of, imagine I'm bench pressing, elbow has to go below the bottom of the shoulder. I think that's what it is. And if someone did a huge as arch before, in theory, you could like say,
yeah, you just do like a half rep.
Arch went up to here. You're not really going through the biggest range of motion with your arm.
Yeah.
That's the general, like, if you could probably Google it if you want to know the exact. I don't think they even put out like an anatomical spot that you had to go lower. They just kind of said below the shoulder, something like that, which I know people were upset about because it's, again, a bit of a grey area.
Yeah.
And as an athlete, you definitely don't want grey areas when you're talking judges. It just feels horrible for the athletes.
Yeah.
It's an interesting one if it gets in. But yeah, I think visually weightlifting is just a lot clearer. And there's no squat rack. Like, that's another thing. Squats in the way of certain viewers and whatnot. Weightlifting, it looks cool.
I think, again, I think it depends also, like you said, I think it really just depends on the spectators at the end of the day, because even if you look at, so for example, we come from strength backgrounds, but if we had to look at marathon athletes, may it be long distance running or long distance swimming or something like that, for me, that's not a very exciting sport to watch. So I will skip through it. But then again, if I had to see probably powerlifting, because I know there's some really strong people there, I would want to watch it. I might not want to sit the whole day and watch it, but I know how James likes to put golf on the whole day. Maybe some people will put the powerlifting on and just, have the TV on at the back. But I mean, that, again, for me, that would be more exciting than those other types of sports. Where, again,
but most people can relate to the marathon. Because
that's
if you think about everyone,
it
the weekend warriors that sign up to them.
How many people can actually watch that and understand it? And I guess they just have a better amount of viewers than maybe what powerlifting would have. And I think even weightlifting at this stage, to be honest.
I do think I would get frustrated. Like, I'm very much, if I'm into something, I'm like a rabid fan. Like, I'm really into it. And I get frustrated because I feel like a lot of the things I'm into always cater or always go after the casual viewer, which I think is what the Olympics want as well, right? They just want they want everyone at home, just the casuals, to tune in.
What are some examples
UFC does it.
Okay, yeah.
Strongman does it, which I'll talk about next with World's Strongest Man. But yeah, there's I feel like a lot of the times they go after the casual viewer instead. Which I just talk about World's Strongest Man?
Yeah, go.
So World's Strongest Man is coming up next week. It starts on the 19th.
Wait, they still don't live stream it, right?
They don't live stream it. So that's what I was going to say. It is a perfect example of them going after the casual viewer. So World's Strongest Man, there was a list. It's broadcast in so many different countries, right? And it airs in the UK over Christmas time. and it's very much targeted at the casual viewer. So for me, right, I love strongman. I like seeing the technique and everything. If I watch it, I can't watch it here on TV. I'll have to find a YouTube link. Hopefully someone uploads it. They will show highlights, right? So let's say, so these are the events this year for the qualifiers: loading race, deadlift. I assume it's deadlift machine, which is what it says on their site. It'll be deadlift for reps, kind of like a Smith machine type thing. Log lift ladder, Conan's wheel, kettlebell toss, and stone off. So those are the qualifiers, which will be over 2 days. So 6 events over 2 days. But, so I want to see, right? So log lift ladder, let's use that as an example. It'll be 5 different logs at varying weights, and 2 guys will run at the same time. This is how it normally is. I'm not actually sure how it'll be this year. But normally 2 guys will go in 2 different lanes, and they'll lift progressively heavier logs. So I personally want to see every single athlete do it, and I want to see the full body shot so I can see their technique and see everything that's going on. And then this is a professional thing for TV. They'll zoom up on the guy's face, so you see him, you see the struggle. And I'm like, dude, what is this? I haven't seen anything of what I actually want to see as a fan that's actually into strongman. But I absolutely understand, for someone flicking the channels, they suddenly see Tom Stoltman with his head going red, grinding out sweat. That's probably going to keep them, locked in. And so that's kind of what I mean. And the UFC does this sort of thing as well, with ignoring rankings and putting on certain fights that they know will sell. So as I feel like kind of what with the powerlifting thing, as they try to. So there was another rule with Blaine Sumner. He used to put chalk on his face like this. And he used to get really hyped up. You had the ammonia in both nostrils and sniff it. Although that's not technical, I find it entertaining, right? It's part of his mental preparation and psych up to go lift. They brought in a rule he's not allowed to do that because they feel like that will, for whatever reason, their particular view of the casual viewer is it'll put them off. Which, it's frustrating as a fan that's into it, but it is what it is. So we got World's Strongest Man will not be live streamed, always comes up. The reason they don't live stream it is because they sell it as a TV package. They make millions of dollars or whatever selling it as a TV package to all these different countries. So I think I'm not sure if it varies year to year, but let's say they make maybe 8 episodes out of it. They'll sell that 8 episodes as a TV package to all these different networks. Personally, so the argument I've heard against this is CrossFit. CrossFit does a live stream for the CrossFit Games, but they also put a TV package together. Why doesn't World's Strongest Man do this? I'm not sure.
Same with the Rogue Invitational.
They did that as well, did they?
Well, they live stream everything. I don't think they sell it to TV, but they live stream all their strongman events. Yeah, we watched them.
They live streamed it,
That's another example. So I think World's Strongest Man, I feel like it's just run by, a little bit more old school people. I don't know, that's just speculation. Another aspect, just building on what I was talking about. So just to quickly go over it, those are the 6 events I listed earlier. We're back to 30 athletes this year, which is fantastic. And then that will go down to 10 athletes for the finals, which is another 8 events. I won't bother listing them all out. But that starts next week on Wednesday. So next time when we speak, it will have already started. And shout out to Matthew Ragg. We've got New Zealand's Strongest Man is competing this year, and it'll be his first year over there. I think he's actually got a great shot at making the finals, so hopefully he can make that work. But about the casual viewer, right? So how strongman works, it's how you do overall. So you could do really well in one event. If you come last in the others, you're going to drop a lot of points. So you want to, you're better off to say come second in every event. So the better you do overall, the better you're going to score, right? Now, this is what came in the last time I was at World's Strongest Man, 2017, they brought this rule in. So there's 6 events in the qualifiers, right? Now, the final event is called Last Man Standing Stones. And so up until this point, there's 6 competitors in the group. and you've got, so the first 5 events, you've got a certain amount of points, and then it goes into last man standing stones, and basically the points only have the order. And how it would work, let's say you and I are going, James.
Yeah.
If you've got more points than me, it's 1-on-1, me versus you. Because you've got more points, you get to, I have to start. So I load the stone over the bar to you, and then you load it back to me. Whoever can't continue is out.
Yeah. This is like physical 100.
We've seen it. What's that? Yeah,
it's like physical 100.
Yeah. They did a similar thing, but it's obviously like those ones took like some of them hours. This is not that long. It's really heavy. But it means you could have a guy, and we've seen it happen, have like a 10-point lead. So by all intents and purposes, should absolutely be going to the finals. And then someone's just fantastic at stones for reps and beats them on the stone off, and then he's through to the finals.
Wait, is it a knockout?
Yeah.
So what's the point? What's the point in points?
Because it is. This is what they told us when I was there in 2017. It's more exciting for the casual viewer. There you go. Caters to the casual viewer. It is exciting. Like, I'll give them that. But
then why do points?
It honestly sucks.
Wait, so do they use the points to rank like the one-on-ones then?
Yeah. So let's say me, you, and Mona. Mona had more points. I had the least, and you had the middle. Me and you would start off. I have to go first, so it means I have to do one more rep than you would.
Yeah.
Before failure. But if I'm really good at stones for reps, it doesn't matter. I could do another rep.
Yeah.
And then let's say I fail, right? Let's say I loaded over 7, you do it over 7, but I started 1, so I can't get it over for the 8th.
Yeah.
I'm out. Immediately, Mona comes in, and then you and Mona keep going. So you've already done 7.
So I'm already at disadvantage.
Yep. So it does give you points, give you an advantage like that, and then later in the order. Except it doesn't. Again, this. Let's say I'm just insane at stone for reps, and you guys are average. In theory, if Tom Stoltman was in last place in stone for reps, in theory he could probably just beat
you just go for
people. And so the reason this was brought in, right, is because how it was just being points overall, you would get to the 6th event, the final event for the TV show before the finals, and say Brian Shaw's ahead 10 points, he doesn't even do the stones. He just doesn't. He might load the first one. So they felt like for the viewer at home, they were like, "Oh, excited to see Brian Shaw," and he just doesn't even, he just does one stone, which is pretty funny because I did forget to mention the person. So the person who's in first in the group, he goes through to the finals no matter what. But it's the guy in second who has that. So there's only one other spot. The guy who wins goes in first. So let's say Brian Shaw wins the event. He goes through automatically now. So he's not in the stone final anyway. So it's a really weird decision. But man, it's frustrating. And the thing is, it flows on over to the amateur level as well and to other professional comps because everyone wants to be like World's Strongest Man. But yeah, just a perfect example of trying to cater to the casual viewer over the actual fans of the sport. Now,
is it always stones? Is that tiebreaker always stones for reps?
Yeah, it's been every year since 2017.
Okay, so you better be damn good at stones.
Yeah, pretty much. So everyone trains them super hard now. Because the other thing, let's say we've got, Farmer's Walk before we do stones. And I know even if I win Farmer's Walk, you guys are far ahead in points. So that it's not going to change the order of the stone off. So I'll just be like, no, I'm not even going to do Farmer's Walk then. I'll just save my energy for the stones. So it's created, although they've tried to solve one thing, it's created all these other little issues. And ultimately, though, just for strongman, where it's meant to be each event is equal, you've suddenly put stones, which I love stones, but you've suddenly made them worth so much more.
Yeah.
Before Last Man Standing, they had actually tried to implement double points for stones. to get around that, but they found the same thing. Like Brian would be ahead so far anyway. But yeah, so I do understand financially. Like I know with the UFC, it's something like the casual fan makes up something like 70% of the revenue, whereas like the other 30%, are the actual people who do MMA or jiu-jitsu, whatever, and actually into it. So I absolutely understand. I bet it might even be more so with strongman. Like let's say they sell it to 100 different countries. Like how many of those, like what percentage of the people who watch World's Strongest Man at Christmas are actual fans? That's probably very minuscule. So I understand why they do it. But as like an avid fan of the sport, it can be frustrating.
Yeah, that's crazy. And if anyone's looking for an Atlas Stone guide, Cole's written a legit Atlas Stone article on Lift Big Eat Big there as well. You can take a look at. Mona, do you have something to say?
Yeah, I was going to say, often like with the viewers and stuff, those are the people that's got like the most money. And it's the same thing, I guess with like CrossFit and things like that. CrossFit has like really pushed weightlifting's numbers up, over the last how many years. And the thing is, like now people are starting to charge for weightlifting classes a lot more because they know a lot of CrossFit athletes are coming over to learn the sport. So weightlifting coaches now actually get compensated a lot more, which is really good because these are really experts in the field. But if you look, for example, like the average Joe doing CrossFit, they probably have a lot more money than like a full-time athlete, for instance.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the paradox that I find was like, because although I don't like it, if it's promoting the sport, indirectly it's going to help get me more income. So it's like, although I don't like it, should I bash it too much when that's what's bringing in casual viewers?
Yeah, so it's like, weigh it up.
Yeah. Some of the casuals will become avid fans, but yeah, it's just a small percentage.
Yeah. Is there anyone else you're keeping an eye on at World's Strongest Man that you think might have a good run?
So the New Zealand guy, Matthew Ragg, I do think is pretty underrated in terms of how good he is. But the thing is, he has competed in America before, but yeah, it'll be his first World's Strongest Man. So I think that's going to be a bit of a hard one, but I do think he's going to be, like, he's got the potential to do some pretty big upsets, and it's really good events for him in the qualifiers. That's actually something I forgot to mention. A big change that they've made, which I am all for, is now, so there's normally five different groups of athletes consisting of 6 athletes each. So it's 30 total athletes. They all do the qualifiers, and then that gets down to 10. How it's always been, and like how it was when I did it, each qualifying group does different events. Like there's normally 2 different sets of events, which I, again, as an athlete, it's so frustrating that I could have, like let's say I had deadlift and you had squat. And then we both made it into the finals. Not that I made the finals, but it's suddenly like we've done different. Like, how can you decide who's the strongest when we've done different events? So this year, every single person has the same events, and they've released it quite far in advance, which I absolutely like. I'm glad they did that. I think that's a fantastic change. They haven't announced the groups yet, so who's in each group, which I also think is fine. So as an athlete, I would much rather know the events, because for me, and like not just me, everyone else who did it, they would send you a list of all the events you might get, and it's like 20 different events. So you're like, man, I got to train everything just in case.
And then 20 events.
Yeah, well, you kind of had to, like, you could double up on certain things, but you kind of had to be ready for anything. Whereas now, they've told everyone these 6 events, and they've known for like 3 months or whatever. So even from an injury perspective, like there's normally so many injuries, but now they actually know what they've got to train for. It's a lot nicer. They haven't yet announced who is in each group. So this is what I would, aside from Last Man Standing Stone, this is something else I would love to see change in the future. But each group, right, has its own scorecard. So let's say me and you, James, were just insane deadlifters, and we had that, let's say it was 360 for reps, and me and you are the best in the world at it, and we're both in the same group. I get 11 reps, you get 12, you win. And then Mona also has deadlift, but she's in a group where everyone's best deadlift is like 360 for 2 reps. Mona does 3 reps, beats her that, so she gets maximum points in her group. We all go through to the finals, but you're absolutely smashed because you've done 12 reps in the qualifiers. Mona's done 3. And there's only 1 day of rest between the qualifiers and the finals. So again, that's a huge difference, man. That's a huge difference in workload.
Why do they have to group it though?
TV. So they, again, it's like they do each episode as one group. So like it's an hour-long episode of this one group, the 6 athletes, and the next episode is the next group. Which is why as well they traditionally had different events, because they want each episode to have different events to keep the viewers entertained. So I think this is
a TV question here. Like I know you mentioned it being, with the TV rights and stuff like that, and like with the viewers and things, because I also know way back then, I used to, when I was a lot younger, used to watch a World's Strongest Man like all the time on ESPN. Is there a specific TV channel now that they can watch it in? Because obviously it's different networks for different countries. So like here in New Zealand, it's ESPN. I think in Australia, it might be like Sky Sports. It's like different for each region you're in. And they do also package each one a little bit different for the region. So they tend to try to get, like, say in America, they'll probably emphasize all the Americans a lot more. And then in the UK version, they'll emphasize all the UK athletes a lot more. But there's not just one channel anymore. But yeah, it's ultimately all these decisions are made for TV. So the different fairness, like I was saying with in terms of volume, one athlete might have done like almost twice as much in terms of volume than someone else. Unfortunately, this can bring up suggestions of corruption, because if you're organizing the groups, suddenly you've got like a lot of power. Let's say I want James to win, and I know he's got a horrible deadlift, but I want him to win. I'm going to somehow put him in a group with other, bad deadlifters, or just how it was in the past. I just wouldn't even give him a deadlift. So there's been allegations of that. Not sure. Personally, from my experience of being there, I do think it's more likely it's just the TV. Like they do have their favorites they want to win, but I think ultimately they always will do whatever will bring them the most viewers. I think that's their bottom line. And unfortunately, it trickles down as an athlete over there. You'll feel, I've heard it's gotten a little bit better, but it's very much like, say you'll warm up, and if they're not ready, they'll tell you to warm up. And then suddenly, if, the lighting is not right, they'll say, sorry, you're going to have to wait. And then they'll fix the cameras, they'll change the lighting, and then you might have to warm up again. Maybe you don't want to warm up, you just want to, go for it. So there's a lot of that different aspect. So there's no, in weightlifting, where there's a specific time that you have your walk on. There's a specific time when you start your lifting. Do they not have that? Oh my gosh. No,
they have a rough guide, like they have a run sheet, but it's run as a TV show. So like the other TV work I've done, it's the same way, but for it's totally like, it's crazy in that, like I did this ad where I held this thing of ham, and they did the same like run sheet, but I'd hold this like 3 kg thing of ham. And then at Worlds, they do the same run sheet. You might have to stop. And instead of holding this ham, you're holding 180 kg stone that might rip your biceps off. So it's it's very much for TV. But you got to remember, even though it's seen as a sport, it is entertainment first. So it started more as an entertainment thing. It's kind of it's not fully WWE, but it is more on that side. I wouldn't say, whereas weightlifting, other than, the alleged corruption and whatnot, is very much a sport first, right? Whereas strongman is sports entertainment. It's crossing that boundary a little bit.
Yeah. Whereabouts is it being held this year? They actually got it in like a... Oh yeah, it's in the States then.
Myrtle Beach, South Carolina.
Yeah. Yeah,
I'm
nice.
terrible with geography. How far is that from you guys?
What was it, like a few hours flight leave? I can't remember now. Maybe
Yeah.
like 4 or 5 hour flight.
Yeah, I have
Yeah.
no idea. I think James's directions is better than mine. So yeah, when it comes to geographics and things like that, yeah, you'll be better
But is
to be
it
able to tell you.
hasn't been held in America for a while, right? Because they usually hold it in some random ass countries.
So it's been in America the last couple of years.
Okay.
So they do contracts where, so when I went, it was in Botswana, and they had like a
Yeah.
contract with the Botswana Tourism Board. So they held it in Botswana again. So I went to Botswana twice.
Interesting.
I heard or I read online that they had a 3-year deal with the States. I'm not sure where it'll go after that. And that tends to impact it. Like, again, I'm hoping it's getting better. But let's say next year it's like in Ghana or somewhere like, very different. They might scrap the idea of the events. They're going to have to, like, the logistics of it all affects things quite a lot. Because again, they're trying to get visually appealing events over, overseas and stuff. So all that stuff makes a big impact, which the fans don't really see a lot of, but it definitely impacts it. And like I said, it does look pretty good for the casual viewer. To see at Christmas time some gigantic man pulling a train or whatever. But yeah, there's a lot that goes into organizing that train and then hopefully testing it and whatnot.
Yeah, well, it's crazy because, like, if you think about the Rogue Invitational, their strongest stuff, they built crazy stuff for that. Like,
Yeah,
World's Strongest Man could literally follow the same model, and they could hold it. I mean, you can't tell me there aren't countries willing to host it, and they have to go to places like Ghana and stuff where they can't maybe do a lot of that stuff because they have to ship all that stuff over, right?
yeah. I do think Rogue has pushed them to improve it quite a bit. Like this, how they've got everyone doing the same events this year is a pretty big change in my opinion. And for how far in advance they've put out the events, I think that's like, it's a pretty big change. Like, I didn't know what I was doing to the day before. So, and I personally, I think that's because of Rogue, because I know they still get a lot of pressure because of Rogue about the live stream, but I don't know, we'll see. And I've heard, so when I was there, like, it was Botswana, so the locals I don't think were into strongman at all, but they're trying to, like, they're putting different packages together for the spectators, which in the past they honestly didn't care about spectators at all. They would, let's say there were 20 people watching, because there wouldn't be normally that many. They'll shift them all to be behind the camera, and that's kind of it. They don't really care. Like, as long as it looks good on TV, that's the number one. But remembering it is World's Strongest Man is a TV show, so it does make sense.
Yeah. No, that's crazy. And that's probably a good place to end this podcast. But before we go, Colm has a new program within the Lift Big, Eat Big Underground. You can go in there and you can use that. It's a 6-week farmer's handle program. So it's basically a farmer's walk specialization for your upper back and traps. 6 weeks. All you need is a pair of farmer's handles and plates, and you can go to town and get massive and strong. So that's in there. It was just published today. Also, if you join the Lift Big, Eat Big Underground, you have access to every other program. So you have all of Mona's weightlifting cycles, Colm Strongman cycles. You have all of the hallmark Lift Big, Eat Big programs in there, like Pump Dragon, Flags Method, the Mule, Bare Bones. All of those are in there as well within the Lift Big, Eat Big training app. And there's more being added each month. Plus, you get access to Mona's online course, her weightlifting mastery, and you can actually join us live on this show in the audience to ask us members only Q&A after each live show when it's not on the live stream anymore. So, and plus you're in private Discord community as well. So there's lots there. It's only $37 a month currently. So you get access to everything for that much. So it's a bargain. But we will end this podcast or show here, and we will see you next week. We're trying to find the day that suits, that's going to be the same every week, and the time that's the same every week. So we'll get there. But in the meantime, if you listen to this on the podcast or on the YouTube, please like, subscribe, share it, comment, anything you can do to help with your engagement to get this to grow. But we will see you next week.